So I put everybody on able to share the content. So we're going to start the webinar now. This webinar is part of the series of webinars, and we're going to start with the introduction to APIOps. With me is Markus Müller, CTO and Head of Development of APIIDA. Hi, Markus.
Hi, Peter.
Good to have you here, and good to have somebody with this knowledge about APIOps in the call. And I would hand over to you now to give the presentation. For everybody who would like to ask questions, please put them into the chat and the question marks, and then we're going to answer this question depending during the call here or at the end of the call. And then hand over to Markus. Markus?
All right, so let's get started. So today's topic is the introduction to APIOps. And if you search the web for a definition of APIOps, this is basically what you get. APIOps is about bringing people, processes, and tools together to achieve better business outcomes by continuously delivering reliable, well-designed API products for consumers. And APIOps is based on applying the practices of DevOps and GitOps to the API development lifecycle. Now that's quite a mouthful, so we'll dive into that in a moment. But in a nutshell, APIOps promises to increase your speed, to increase your time to market, to raise your quality, and to reduce risk. And what we want to do today is we want to have a look at the definition, like what is it apart from that one sentence? How does it help you? Why should you adopt it? And finally, how it is done in the real world and how you get started with it. So without further ado, let's get started and have a closer look at the definition and what it does actually mean. So the sentence started with like, okay, so this applies the principles of DevOps, but what actually is DevOps? It has been one of the buzzwords in the industry for quite a few years, but just a short recap, so we are sure that everyone is on the same page here. So what we're basically looking at is a way of working, right? So DevOps is, again, a set of tools, a set of principles, a set of methods that you can use to build your applications, to test them, to put them to the release, and also to monitor the results of the changes that you have done and to plan ahead for the next iteration. So this is a cyclic process, and it's really all about enabling these fast feedback loops that are needed for agile development. And very central to this idea of DevOps is that development and operations are not isolated from each other, right? So there's no handoff, no bottleneck. More loosely said, it's like you build it, you run it. And what the optimization goal for DevOps is, you want to optimize flow. You want to optimize the reduction of constraints. So you want a steady stream of changes that get released for your customers that you can validate if they had the desired impact, if your business outcome is now better than before, more towards the goal you're working towards. And then start the next cycle, start the next cycle, start the next cycle. So this is all about fast feedback and optimizing flow, right? So you don't have these fixed release windows like, okay, next month is released, now it's crunch time for the last 2 weeks, and then we release it, and then everyone goes off to a vacation. But it's a steady stream of innovation. And the methods that DevOps defines are basically these. So you want to do automated builds, right? So you don't want to have somebody be responsible to create a build. Especially because we will see that this happens continuously. This happens all the time. The faster, the better. So you don't want to have a person doing that by hand. Same goes for testing, because we want to be able to ship code as fast as possible and changes as fast as possible to the consumers. What we ultimately want to do is we want to automate the testing, and we want the testing to be complete. So we want to be absolutely sure if all my tests go green, then I can release it. No need for a manual QA, right? So if it turns green, it's okay, it can be released. And what enables, or these two methods enable continuous integration, which basically means that developers are not developing behind closed doors, and then like 2 weeks before release, everyone brings their changes together, and it's it's a big mesh of all the changes that have been done. But you want to do that continuously. You want to do it as you go. The faster a change is in the main code base, the better, right? So always iterate, always make it fast, small batches. So DevOps is, basically the go-to methods of agile development. And agile again took quite a bit of the lean methodology with it. So you want to work in small batches, have these small batches continuously integrated. And if you are able to continuously integrate, you also want to be able to continuously deliver, because there's no need in queuing up all these changes when you are sure by your automated testing that you can ship it to your customers. So especially in a SaaS type of application, or if you work with like, okay, until it's non-breaking, I'm free to update. What you want to do is you want to continuously ship your improvements, because in the world of agile and lean, what you need to do is you need to measure the impact. So you do a change and you want to know, okay, are my metrics better now? Are my performance indicators better now? And that means that you need to ship it as fast as possible in order to measure your return on that change and make changes as you go. One thing that's also present in DevOps, but way more in GitOps, what we're talking about in a minute, is everything as code. Might be infrastructure, it might be your API proxies, it might be whatever. So you want to have everything as code, right? Because code is what all these tools are built around. They are not built around fancy UIs. They are not built around proprietary database structures. They are built around code. They can work with code. They can work very efficiently with code. So what you want to do is you want to have everything as code. And last but definitely not least is one of the keystones or the cornerstones of the DevOps methods is collaboration and communication. And you can already see this in development and operations, not treated as isolated silos, but as one team. So collaboration, communication is key. Again, get that fast feedback going, right? So do whatever you have to do to ship your changes, to get the changes in production, and to get the outcomes out of it. Now, if we look at GitOps, one quote that you might find online is GitOps is an operational framework that takes DevOps best practices used for application development, such as version control, collaboration, compliance, CI/CD, and applies them to infrastructure automation. So this is not about getting changes to your code, to your actual application out as fast as possible, but doing changes to your infrastructure as fast as possible. Have a single source of truth for your infrastructure configuration, right? Again, you want to have that as code. So you want to have some definition files, YAML, JSON, what have you, that describe how your infrastructure should look like, right? And that infrastructure as code, you put that in a Git repository. Git repositories are used for sharing code with other people, for versioning this code with other people together. And so what you want to have is you want to have a mirror image basically of your infrastructure described as code. So you can collaborate on that again, right? So everyone in the team can change the code. So everyone can change the infrastructure. So what you then do is to make sure that no changes go to production that you don't want to have in production is that if you apply GitOps, you usually do it with merge requests. Now, merge requests is where somebody proposes a change and then the rest of the team can collaborate on that change and they can review that change. They can, give comments and say, okay, is that really a good idea? Do we really want to do that? Doesn't that break any of the systems? And then this merge request is finally approved. And this configuration change goes into that repository. And what then happens is for every change in that repository, the CI/CD pipeline starts. And this means that now the actual infrastructure that is running, that is deployed, is now configured accordingly to the code that is in your repositories. So any changes you do once they are merged are now replicated to the real world, replicated to your infrastructure. So basically your infrastructure becomes the, if you will, impersonation of that code definition. And to bring it all together to APIOps, that basically means we take the methods and the principles of DevOps, so for application development, and we also take the principles and methods of GitOps for infrastructure automation, and we put it together because an API always has, at least two parts. It's the real API, so the upstream system, your backend system that delivers the functionality that you are going to expose to the outside world. And it's also that part of infrastructure that makes sure it's available to the outside world. Every request is checked. Every request is authenticated. Every request is like it should be before it is handed over to the backend systems. So an API always is application and infrastructure. And that basically is why we bring together these two sets of methods to form APIOps. So APIOps is an API development and deployment process that includes all the aspects of modern API lifecycle. And besides what I did mention, that is also like design, documentation, management, governance, security, everything, right? So you want to express everything as code. You want to put everything in your repository. You want to make changes to it. And these changes should be reflected on your environment. So that is basically an overview on what APIOps is and what it does mean from the perspective of like, oh, it's DevOps and GitOps together, right? So you read that and say, yeah, okay, but that is the background, right? That is why it makes sense. And in the next section, we will talk about why APIOps is such a good concept and why you definitely want to use it. And for that, I hand over to Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Markus. I put in as co-host now, and thank you for the handover. So the question is, why APIOps? And there are many, many aspects you should consider. One is, and we go for this a bit longer then, is increasing demand of APIs. If you're going to look into your own company, then you will see that more and more APIs asked for. So the business is asking for more APIs because they understand that APIs create more business. So increasing demand of APIs is very important for you, and you should have a look at that one. From the product perspective, product teams, if you do not look into the APIOps, then you create your own APIs all the time. But there's no governance, there's no structure behind it, and you have many APIs from the technical perspective that is reused by others or not reused by others. So APIOps helps you to govern all this information. Another point is, and I guess everybody knows this, automation. Automation is key because you would like to be as fast as possible. And on the other hand, you would like to be not involved in the operational tasks all the time. You would like to develop APIs. So automation is key, and APIOps brings the automation into place. If you look to the market then, on the right side, war for talent, then in the past, you have had a big team for APIs. Big team means for the number of APIs you need to run, you need to create. But now it does less and less people. So you need to create more APIs with less people, and the war of talents is out there. So you're not able to get new talents on board. Faster reaction time, time to market, all comes together, and the business demand is, like I said before, is raising. And they would like to get features faster and even changes faster. Do what matters, already talked about this one. If you would like to develop APIs, then automate everything else. This brings me to the next slide, where we talk about the race Can you switch to the next slide? Thank you. When we think race of APIs, the growth is fueled by different aspects. Digitalization, we know this from a long time. So customers who already did this in the past, like the big ones, they can make more money, can react faster to the market. And this digital transformation is going faster and faster. The adoption of APIs first strategy, even though, will help you to create new APIs faster. So what's happening is, if it's on CIO, CTO level, then we'll say, okay, can we do this with APIs? API first, and you have more demand than before. Modernization also puts into place because in the past you have very old structures, very old infrastructure, not flexible enough, and these need to transform into a flexible, easy to use API. This keeps another kick into the part of needed APIs. And one of the major aspects is, if you cannot keep up with the demand today because lack of people, lack of knowledge, lack of automation, it will get worse every year. So sometimes I get the question, I do not have time to look into the topic APIOps. But then I say, if you're not looking at this now, you will have less time in the future and you cannot keep up with the demand. So have a look at APIOps and get it involved. If you look at the business perspective on the next slide, then the business gets a lot more demand. First part would be time to market. And this is really something where you can differentiate from other companies. So time to market is really essential for every API management part. Then it will also help you to reduce risk. Because of the automation, you bring in APIs automatically. You can check them automatically before they go to production or next stage, for example. So reducing risk in operation, but as well, you can reduce risk in the security area by creating templates on for your APIs. Obviously, it will reduce cost because automation in the background will help to reduce the number, the people you need for just operational tasks, but help you on the other side to have more people creating APIs. Know-how, very essential. Like we said in the beginning, that less and less people you will have to create more and more APIs. If you really structure this one and get it automated, you have more power. You can bring more power to the street. Increased security and quality is also one very, very demanding part. As we see in the moment that there are lots of hacking attacks to the API market. So make sure that API is structured in the right way and use templates, for example, for security reasons. This was a part of the why APIOps, and I hope hand back to Markus.
Yeah, so up next, we take a look into how APIOps works in the real world. So what we're going to start with is like, okay, how does the typical setup looks like if you are not applying principles of APIOps? So what you find with a lot of companies is there are the different teams that create the upstream services, and these upstream services provide all different kinds of APIs. And these upstream services then direct the request at the API team and say, okay, we need to have this published. We don't care how you do it. We just know, okay, this is our API. We are ready. We're finished. And they hand it off to the API team, say, okay, just do something with it. And then the API team goes on, creates API proxies on their API gateways. If you are not deploying an API gateway right now, you better talk to us because that is a very essential tool for making sure your APIs stay secure. And you take a lot of load out of the upstream teams because they don't need to handle all these edge cases and security stuff. You can do that on the gateway. But if you have a gateway deployed, then probably you also have an API team. And in this scenario, this API team creates those proxies. It manages that the services are deployed to the gateway. And that basically means it's always manual because the API team has to look at the service first. So they have to decide on what they do, how they secure it. So there's no end-to-end automation possible. The API team also only knows that there is an API and how it looks like. It doesn't know why it was created in the first place. So now all of the deployment stuff and all of the security checks are basically decoupled from your problem domain, right? So they can't do anything because they feel it makes sense because they don't know why this API even exists. Another thing that you often find is the API team, because of that, acts as a gatekeeper, right? And they are very skeptical, like, you really need that API because it's work for them, right? It's work. They have to figure everything out and they have to make sure and they have to guarantee that everything's up and running. So most of the time, or a lot of the time, it's just, yeah, okay, we have that request to publish it, but yeah, we have other things to do and so on and so on. And that basically just lengthens the time from when the upstream team has something to test, has something to publish, until it really is published. Now the upstream teams can't wait, right? So they can't wait so long. So they start to work on different things. And now validation of your ideas gets a whole lot more difficult because you always have that unknown amount of time that you have to wait until you can start your validation. And then there are other changes in, and then they might interfere with each other. So this is really problematic. When it comes to reuse, reuse in this scenario is often only a technical consideration, right? So the API team says, okay, didn't we have a service that looked similar, that had almost the same requirements? So maybe we can reuse some of the stuff we did there. But that is just on the API proxy level, right? So there's no collaboration to the upstream teams. And of course, as said, DevOps is aiming for a very good flow, a consistent flow, no bottlenecks, remove the constraints you have. Basically, like if you look at it at a shop floor, you want your goods to move in a steady flow through your factory. You don't want to have a lot of buffers that you need because there's bottlenecks, right? So you want a constant flow, and it's the same with the changes you deploy. And if you have such an API team, this usually is the bottleneck, right? So these guys are always too few people with too much work, so they're almost a constraint for you, almost always a constraint for your flow. So now you say, okay, I want to change something. I introduce APIOps, and you just say, okay, you build it, you run it. Every team is responsible itself, and you take out all of the API team. You take out all of that middle layer. And what you gain now is you can do end-to-end automations because the upstream teams, they basically know everything about their service. They know everything about the problem domain. So they can create the configuration as they see fit. However, usually each team comes up with a slightly different process with slightly different definitions. And that means that this will hamper your reusability, right? Because it fosters isolation. So every team is trying to optimize for itself. So you have a whole lot of local optimizations, but not a global one. However, you get a very fast feedback loop because it's basically only limited by the team itself. But how to make sure that all of your APIs are looking kind of similar, that they have the similar shape, that the checks that need to be done is done in the same way, that is very, very hard, right? So you can write some, endless conference pages or Word documents describing what they have to do, but they usually come up with their own solutions. So you have no central entity that can keep track of, of governance, of compliance. So while this approach gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of speed, it probably ends in the nightmare for maintenance and for support, right? So 5 years along the line, you probably will hate that you chose that approach until you have really, really good people in these teams that understand the problem. So what you probably want to do, and what we see with a lot of organizations moving to, especially the more successful organizations, is that they start some kind of API platform, sometimes called an integration platform, integration hub, you name it, but the idea is basically the same. So what you do is you basically expand your API gateway to be much more. So you expand it from being a gateway that just checks requests to a platform. And this platform is then managed by the platform team. So, however, this platform allows you to do end-to-end automation with a certain set of capabilities, and the upstream teams can use these capabilities. And these capabilities are maintained and expanded by the platform team. But the platform team doesn't interact directly with the upstreams, right? It's just there to manage to create this API platform and to enable the team. So your platform team, your former API team that acted as a gatekeeper now acts as an enabler. And that is what you want to have ultimately, right? So they have now the time to teach the teams how to use the platform. And as there are no handovers, because the teams still do everything on their own, but against the platform and not directly against the gateway, you still have no constraint. You have no other team that's in the way. So you still have that fast flow. You still have that fast feedback loop, but the platform can do much more than the gateway. The platform can now check your APIs for compliancy with the guidelines, with the style guides that you allowed for the teams to use. So you basically add in an automated way of checking not only structural integrity, but also check adherence to the company guidelines. And that is why an API platform, basically is able to guarantee that type of governance that you need, especially in a bigger setup, to not run into the problem that, in 5 years down the line, things turn to a maintenance nightmare. So this is, at least if you ask us, the approach to use. So the teams interact not with your gateways. They are not, changing the gateways directly, but they interact with your API platform, your integration hub, call it like you want, but your entity that manages your APIs. Now, until now, we only talked about the publishing side of things, but that's only one side of APIs, right? So of course you need to publish them, and of course that is where API ops live. But you need to make sure that for the consumer side, it doesn't get worse, right? So what you don't want to have is like your consumer experience goes down the drain because you are optimizing for publishing experience. And to do this, what you need is you need to deploy an API platform that is capable of running an API catalog. So one place where all your APIs come together, where the documentation comes together. So all the stuff that you provision using the APIOps principles, the Open API specification, the async API specification, documentation, proxy specs, and so on and so on. You need that one place where everything comes together and basically can be found. So you need to have a unified API catalog that spans all of your APIs. And that is used by the consumers to discover your APIs, to know that they are there, to learn how to use them in the right way, maybe to create, client stubs and all that kind of stuff. And the one thing that you want to make sure is that this API catalog really has all your APIs in it, right? So there might be a case where you have like multiple of these API gateway systems. There might be a case where you have some external APIs that are not even running on your own systems, but that you want your people to have access to as well. So you need to make sure that your API catalog has all of that. And ideally, all of the workflows that a consumer needs to do, like, okay, I want access to that API. Okay, how many calls am I allowed to that API? That is handled at one central place and not spread around. And if you can do that, what you get is you get an increased adoption because you make it easy for consumers to work with your APIs. And you get a higher reuse because now people, if they know what other people did in the company, if they know what other units did, they get ideas on how to reuse that and how to build combined applications out of multiple services and so on. And you get better collaboration because you're not constantly looking for information and so on and so on and so on. So this gives you additionally to enabling APIOps, these platforms that have that big API catalog that are capable of doing that across different runtimes and gateways, that gives you an edge on the consumer side. And again, your upstream teams will love that because that enables them to get that fast feedback loop. Because while you can, have all the benefits like reduced costs and, you're faster to market and so on, what you can't leverage if you only look at the publisher side is the business outcomes, right? So you need to make sure that the consumers, these are the ones that actually create the desired results, that they are able to work with the APIs, because otherwise this API will fail. And an API fails if it doesn't fulfill its business case, right? So you always have to keep that in mind. Not only look at the publisher experience, but also look at the consumer experience. So that brings us to the question, all right, so you guys, you just told me what APIOps is. You told me why I need to do it. You told me what's the best way to do it by using such a platform. Okay, but how do I get going, right? So what's next? What do I do next? And basically, adopting this model is quite similar to all of the other things that you do in the agile world. So you always have this learn, experiment, improve cycle. The only exception is that we now have an open step, right? So first you have to accustom yourself on how to handle APIs and their proxies as code. Now, if your API gateway, there are some gateways that just hide away the code, right? And let you use their shiny user interface, but what you want to have is you want that as code. So make sure that you exactly know how to get the code out of it, how to get APIs into it again, and that in an automated fashion. What you also want to do before doing anything else is, if you have a staged environment where you have development, testing or integration, whatever it's named, and then production, you want to have the deployments between each stage, you want to have that automated. Again, this is easier if you have the API proxy as code, right? So then you can just extract it from the one stage and put it into the other. However, when you really use APIOps and have that with very small batches, fast feedback cycles, multiple deployments a day, you want to have figured out automating that first, right? So don't start at the end, get the foundations, right? So automate the deployment between stages. Next thing is, okay, we now have code. We now can deploy that code. So now introduce a Git repository as your single source of truth. So then you have all the basics done. Next thing is that you want to make sure if you run for that, if you go for that, you build it, you run it approach, that you have your guidelines ready, that you have your style guides ready. So how do APIs look? How is this security feature? How is it implemented against the gateway? And then obviously you also need to introduce tools that enforce these guidelines and style guides, because to be honest, having them isn't worth anything. They need to be applied, and only if they are applied and all your APIs are compliant to it, then you get the outcome that you want. So introduce some tools, use some linters, use whatever, but make sure that these guidelines and style guides are enforced. And the good thing about all the stuff that I introduced you to now, or until now, is that you can make that work even within your old API team. So you don't have to do any changes to the organizational structure at first, but make sure you do your homework. Make sure your API team runs these processes. They run them efficiently. And if that is, I don't say flawless, because honestly, if you nail it 90%, that's great. No one ever achieves 100% of that. So if that works pretty well, then you can slowly open to the publishing teams, and then you can start thinking about self-service solutions. If you haven't, the foundation done, and you start with self-service, you're making sure that you put yourself into a real bumpy ride, and no need for that. But of course, there's always a fast track. And in this case, the fast track is APIIDA. So if you want to introduce API ops for your API team, for your platform team, for your integration team, we have 3 options for you. First option is we have our solution engineering. So we have a lot of great people around here, having done a lot of API transformation, a lot of introduction of API ops, and these experts can help you along the line. So when you are struggling, or when you just need to create awareness, so that's the first step. You need to create awareness within the company that that's something that's worthwhile, right? So that's worth the effort. So if you need some support there, if you need to do some workshops, if you need to get some C-level on board or whatever, make sure that you contact us so we can help you with that. We can do health checks and architectural analysis of how your infrastructure looks right now, how you work right now, if we think it's beneficial for you to change your approach. And we can also take care of change management while you adopt API ops, because a lot of the times it's easier that you have an external one that says, okay, you need to optimize that. We need to change that. Has this been done? Okay, so a lot of the time it's easier if that comes from outside of the team than from inside of the team. Unless you have a very motivated team, then it's better to put that responsibility within the team. So next thing we can help you with is if you're running Broadcom layer 7, then you can, enable API ops methodologies using our API Gateway Manager. So we can take care of automated builds, automated deployments. We can integrate layer 7 nicely into a CI/CD pipeline, and we can take care of all the integration with the Git repositories, right? So get the APIs out as code from the layer 7 in a way that is, machine readable and human readable, and that works just well with Git. Because as you might know, Broadcom layer 7, all of the configuration is done in XML files, and XML files in Git just isn't, it wasn't built for it. Let's just put it that way. So with our tool, with the API Gateway Manager, we can help you doing just that, introducing those methods to the team and to your infrastructure. And if you want to go the next and final step, so we have our Obsidian platform, and it's a comprehensive API platform that allows unified management across multiple runtimes. We can take care of discovery, so all of the consumer stuff is there. We can enforce these guidelines and style guides that we talked about. So you get ratings, security ratings, quality ratings, and these ratings can also act as quality gates in a pipeline. So you can really enforce it and say, okay, if the security score is below, 70, this API is not published. Right? And every change is re-evaluated. So you don't have like that situation where you do an audit at or a pen test at the release of the API, and then slowly your security level degrades, change over change over change, until you have the next audit or pen test. So we can really set that as a quality gate and prevent this degradation from happening. And also this platform is full featured, is low maintenance. You don't have to have dedicated people only looking after that platform. So you can really leverage that total cost of ownership reduction. So yeah, that is what we can do for you with API Ops. And of course, this was the introduction to API Ops. This was the first installment of this new webinar series, which brings us to the question, what's next in the series and what are the topics we're gonna cover during the next weeks? And for that, I hand over to Peter again.
Thank you, Marcus. This was a really great overview, really great start to the API Ops topics. So what we did is we have had a closer look about DevOps, because there's a foundation for API Ops. Then we talked about why API Ops, so from the business demand as well from the technical side. Then we have had the part of the API Ops in the real world. So you get some really interesting insights how it looks like. And then how to get it going. So this was also very beneficial. So how to start with this. If you now look at the series, then you can see that there are many other topics around API Ops. And the next one would be APIs as a product. And I wonder what this would be. And if you wonder as well, then please join us at the 14th of July here in the same theater, and you will get the answer to this one. If you're interested in the other pieces, and you hope you will, then please join us as well to the other topics. This said, thank you very much for everybody to listen into the webinar today. And thank you, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you from me as well, and have a good time.